How do you see the impact of the coronavirus on Christian practice and belief here in the UK?
Oh, it's a great question. I think it has been an eye-opening period for us all. I think, not just the church, but I think all religious communities in terms of what our responsibility is to those in our parishes, in our synagogues, in our mosques. It's been it's been an intensive last 4 weeks. I think we are in lockdown now, or something like that, and it's been an intensive period. Trying to maintain relationships, trying to kind of tick things over, keep people at at peace, and trying to alleviate some of the anxiety that is out there. And so we're coming to a period now where I feel like we've gotten over a little bit of the initial surge. And now as a minister, as clergy, I think we're dealing more with that settling in, possible depression. This is looking like it's going to last longer than maybe any of us anticipated. And so I think we're heading into a different phase of this, of this lockdown and this pandemic that I think is going to be, we're losing, at least I feel like, losing some of the initial adrenaline of okay, what do we do differently? How do we act as a church online, and all of these types of things? But those questions seem to be fading a little bit, and we're getting maybe hit more with the brunt realities of depression, of isolation, of people's mental and physical well-being suffering during this time.
And what resources does the church have to tackle those issues of mental well-being and isolation?
Well, I think we have the clergy is probably the primary resource in the beginning, and for some churches they'll have smaller home groups that are meeting. We have some of our home groups in our church meeting via Zoom during the week, so there are connections being made. I just think it's difficult to meet the needs of people and certain people because of the lack of ability to meet with anybody face to face. I think that is really hurting our opportunities to minister. It doesn't, we're not completely kind of cut off, that everything isn't completely, disaster in the sense that we have these internet technologies to use. But I just feel that we're losing quite a bit, and maybe it's sinking in maybe more and more for people as these days go on, quite how much we're missing that human contact that we need just as human beings.
So I completely agree that sense of the human connection, that physicality, is very much part of human existence, and the yearning for that is so important. But there we are. This is what we've got.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm seeing you on a screen. Can you do? Let's look at what resources do you have to help people in the situation? What's actually happening in terms of this desire for that connection? And the best we've got to offer is video conferencing or video Zoom technology, etc. So come on, what give your flock?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm wrestling with this myself in the sense of, I think of this time as one, and I'm hoping that it is a temporary time, because to me it seems like, I don't know if you've ever gone home for a family visit and you were getting ready for a huge family feast and you're excited to see everyone. But everybody in the car, the kids are groaning and moaning on the motorway. So you pull off to a petrol station and grab some quick snacks and satisfy yourself that way, just to try to keep everybody quiet until you get to the feast. And to a certain extent, I feel like that's what internet technologies are doing for us at the moment. They're a little stop along the way at the petrol station to have some snacks. And I suppose I'm different maybe than some others who think, oh, well, this is the new way we're going to do church, and this is the new kind of exciting movement in the church. But I don't mean to be, I'm not a Luddite by any stretch of the imagination, but I do feel like the internet and some of these Zoom technologies can help, and they do provide some sense of connection. But really, I mean, I for one am just hoping and praying that we can get back to our communities, and I think, and I so look forward to that celebration of being back. You know, we've already been talking about, you know, when we get back and have that first church service, and you know, you hear, for us, you hear the organ again, and we'll have a big lunch and a big feast. You know, we'll celebrate the passing of this time. So it's a bit like the wilderness journey, isn't it? At this point, we're kind of wandering in the wilderness, waiting to get back into the land.
That's a really interesting analogy. You can tell that you're an Old Testament professor with that analogy. I wonder whether wilderness is the right term, though, Mark. I wonder whether we're more on a journey, a path, rather than in the wilderness. Because in the wilderness, the children of Israel were completely isolated. Yes, they had a special relationship with the Almighty, but they were and attacked on various sides. So I can see some analogies with the coronavirus, of course, in terms of its attack. But I just wonder whether we can see it as a slightly more positive experience. Or let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
What are the positives that are arising from this period of isolation? And even when we get, even when the church doors are open again, the likelihood is that only very small numbers will be allowed in, and you'll be sitting 2 meters away from each other. So, you know, the offering of peace is a very different one.
Yes, and we have a small church, so we don't have too much room for that many people to sit 6 feet apart. Well, I think on the positive side, I mean, this is an interesting thing, because I think that there is, you know, perhaps at times in the church there is a kind of a movement towards, you know, clericalism, where, you know, and maybe in any, and whether it's in the synagogues or the mosques or whatever religious communities, there is a sense of the religious, the leaders, or kind of the professionals, and taking charge. And I think what this has done on a positive role is actually one of the things I've been encouraging our congregation is to reach out themselves, and to know that they, you know, that their voices, their communication with others in the congregation, them helping purchase groceries for those in need. You know, we've seen kind of, you know, these little, you know, acts of gracious generosity happening within our own community, even though we're dispersed. So that's been, I think, a very positive thing. The other interesting thing is, you know, at this time I'm continuing my research, and actually right now I'm working in Leviticus. You know, I've been studying the dietary laws of Leviticus chapter 12, and one of the scholarly theories is what is appropriate for the altar is appropriate to eat at the table. And so I think we have a great debt in Christianity to Judaism for this connection between altar and table, and the connection between home and sacred space. And that, I think, is one very interesting thing that's been happening in the lives of our parishioners and people that I know, is that the home is becoming more of a place of sacred worship, of holiness, of teaching, of all of these types of things. I mean, I've experienced this in our own family. And so I think that rebalancing, don't get me wrong, I still desperately miss the sacred space of the church. And I think there is something powerful in that. But I think what we see in ancient Israel is that balance between the sacredness of the home and the sacredness of the sanctuary, or the temple space.
So in a way, what you're draw this conversation to a close is a renewed theology, but in this case for the church, a theology of the home, a liturgy almost the home. And you're right that many Jewish ceremonies take place in the home anyway, the Sabbath, the Shabbat meal, Passover, and so on. And building is less significant in Judaism than in Christianity. And your study of Leviticus, I suppose, is showing something to you about that. So is that something that will continue?
I hope so. I mean, I think one of the, in my experience thus far, I think one of the most dangerous things that we encounter as a society during this time is is the saturation that can happen with kind of technology. And I see, that it's a very fine balance right now. I think we want to use technologies as religious communities to benefit and to bless. But I think there is a darker side to that. And I know of people, and myself included, I might be sitting in front of a computer screen for 8 hours a day, which just is soul draining and soul quenching. And so I think there is, I think that there's a balance that I'm trying to encourage, at least in my own congregation, of finding that sacred time of, if you can get out for a walk. I mean, you and I live in a beautiful, beautiful part of the world in Cambridge. The spring is coming into its full blossom and bloom right now. And we have this opportunity to step away from our screens to really think through and to meditate on who we are as human beings in this world. And I think our screens have the chance to pull us away from that. And so I'm really trying to encourage people, yes, do use the technology, do use that to stay in touch, but don't forget your humanity. Don't forget your connection to the seasons, to God's creation. Get away from your screens, be with your family, be with your spouses, those types of things. And so I think I think there is an important balance in all of this, that we don't kind of tip the scales one way or the other, because I think there is that inkling of desire in us to stay busy and to feel like we're being productive in this time, when I think there is a certain gift about this time, about stepping away from our normal activities and kind of reevaluating who we are as human beings and who we are as kind of as a culture as well.
Reverend Mark Scarlata, thank you very much.
Great to be with you, Ed.